Hello, and welcome to the CX Innovators Podcast, produced by Networld Media Group. I'm Judy Model, editor of Retail Customer Experience. Our podcast is all about talking with innovators, and today's guest fulfills that definition. Chris Gillen is the CEO and co-owner of A Closer Look, which shows brands how to win customer loyalty through great experiences rather than a discount or a sale. His work helps companies create the kind of connection with a customer that lasts longer than a promotional offer. So, for more than 25 years, A Closer Look has worked with brands that want to truly understand their customer experience and fix the problems that hurt loyalty and profits. It does this by combining customer feedback with detailed analysis to help brands build stronger relationships with their customers. So thank you so much for being here, Chris.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Judy. That
Well,
was
I think you
perfect
helped me put it
introduction.
together. So that was a good thing. So,
Thank
we're kicking off a new year. Let's kick off talking about the current state of the customer loyalty program.
you.
Many seem to be centered around discounts and promotions.
Mhm.
So, what's your perspective, and what do you think of that strategy?
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks for having me, Judy. I'm always excited to come on these kind of podcasts and really talk about the state of customer experience because it's just undergoing such dramatic change. And
Right.
before I can even talk about customer loyalty, I mean, I think we have to kind of talk about the elephant in the room, which is, the world is undergoing unprecedented change. As a matter of fact, a lot of people are referring to what we're going through as the fourth industrial revolution, right? Everybody remembers the industrial revolution that gave us, lights and the steam engine and all these amazing technological advancements that really changed the way we work and changed the way we live. And we're going through that now. We're going through this time where the way we work, the way we consume is just under fire.
Right.
And how that kind of relates back to when we talk about loyalty programs and what drives customer loyalty is that what has worked for the last 50 years, which is low prices, discounts, promotions, offers, loyalty programs that are predicated on the frequency of visits and purchases are falling out of favor with this younger generation that's kind of coming up. And that's one of the keys to change, right? Is that
Right.
for the last 70 years, baby boomers have been in control of the consumption narrative. They've determined, who's in and who's out. And that's changing because they're phasing out. And then, you have a whole new generation that's kind of coming up that is not doing things the way their parents or their grandparents did things. They're really rewriting the narrative. And I think what that's leading to, Judy, is this brands are struggling. We saw more restaurant bankruptcies last year than any other year in the last 5 years. And that signals this shift. And so when you see brands that are just doubling down on low price and value and come in and be part of my loyalty program, it's not working.
Right.
And it's really, really a time for a change, which is why I like to talk about emotive loyalty and what kind of creates that. But you're seeing this upheaval right now, and you're going to continue to see it over the next couple of years as this generation takes a more prominent role in spending and where they're spending. And so brands are really at a crossroads right now to rethink what they've been doing for the last 30, 40, 50 years and how they're going to do that differently.
And talking about the consumer today, I think that's what's driving a lot of the change is what the consumer wants or expects. And so when you're talking about delivering great service, how can a brand create experiences that forge that genuine emotional connection? Because
Yeah,
I think that's, the customer today wants that over
yeah,
the buy one, get one
that's
free
right.
meal.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's lots of studies and things you can access via the internet to kind of talk about what's important to this new generation that's coming up, and value is going to be one of those things. You're not going to overpay for something. Everybody wants
Right.
value, but it's not the primary thing anymore. They want sensory level experiences. They want to feel a connection in some way to the brand, whether that's with what the brand, their values, do their values align with my values? They want a deeper connection with brands. And, sometimes I'll get challenged. It's like, well, so are you saying that, if you go to McDonald's to order a hamburger, that you have to have this sensory experience? And I'm saying, well, no, that's not the point, right? There are some brands that are transactionally driven, but that doesn't mean that you can't create a superior moment or connection with that customer that transcends I'm going just because I can get $1 hamburger, right? And so I think that's where brands are struggling to figure out, well, what do you want? Which is why this concept of emotive loyalty, which is not new, it's been around. I think it's just been lingering in the background for certain brands, is really starting to rise to prominence. And if you break down emotive loyalty, what it is, there are 4 what I refer to as cornerstones. And that is connection, which is I've got to have some connection with you. I've got to either have a product or a service or something that you want, right? That's one. Personalization, how do I make that very unique for you? And I'm not just talking about you getting bombarded in your social media feed or your email feed with, targeted ads. I'm talking something deeper than that. How does that brand make you feel and allows you to know that they're happy you're spending the money with them?
Right.
Consistency, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, it's a big one. And then investment. And investment ties back to that loyalty connection. It's like, what am I offering you? What am I doing to show you that, if you're coming and you're interacting with the brand, we're doing something to show you that you're important to us. And that's where that loyalty ties in. So what we're trying to do is help brands kind of understand that leading with value and price, and that, if that's your only trick in the bag, that's going to fall flat every single time, or it's going to give you a little bit of juice. It's kind of like an adrenaline hit. You launch a new menu item, people are excited about it, that lasts for about 30 days, and then you're trying to figure out the next thing to do. Why not figure out how you create more sustainable connections with your customers so you don't need those gimmicks and tricks all the time to get them to come back and spend time with your brand?
Right, because all those promotions, that's work unto itself, especially if you're dealing with a brand that's franchised, right? So if we step back and talk about the sensory experience a little bit more, can you share some examples where brands have done this particularly well?
Yeah. I think, that's how we make a lot of decisions based on things we see and touch and hear and smell. And smell is arguably one of our greatest senses, right? You know that. And I always think about, I'm going to date myself. I'm going to talk about walking into a mall, right? I don't know if anyone's even doing that anymore, but you remember the days when you'd walk into the mall and Cinnabon would be cranking up some cinnamon rolls, and then you walked in and you weren't hungry for a cinnamon roll, but the minute you smelled that, you were like, oh, I want a cinnamon roll.
Exactly.
Right. That's the power of that sensory level experience. And it really is a powerful thing. Like, you walk into a coffee shop, pick your brand, you want to smell coffee, not Fabuloso cleaner, right? And so brands I think they're starting to reconnect with this idea that the sensory experience is really important, what you hear and what you smell. The smell thing is interesting because if you're on Instagram at any moment in time, there's all these ads that are coming up now to make your home smell good. Right. And, John Legend, I think, is doing promotions for this, in-home incense kind of thing. So, but smell is a really, really important part of how we make decisions. And so there are some brands, I think, that do this incredibly well. And they're typically, you think about Crumble cookies, and you walk into one of their locations, it's that first thing that hits you. But I think other brands are starting to kind of figure out that there is a powerful connection, especially if I've never interacted with your brand before. When I walk in, what am I hearing? Is the music too loud? What am I playing? What's the ambiance? What's that feel?
Exactly.
Why do you suddenly get drawn to a place when people say, oh, it's got good energy to it, it's got a good feel? That's by design. Those are all things that are being crafted to help you
the
build
reverse,
that connection. What's that?
And the reverse, Chris, like when you walk in and you're you're startled or you're bombarded or, the music is negative,
That's exactly right.
you're like, all right, I'm
Yeah,
going to walk
yeah.
a little further down the
It's a full experience, and
Right,
restaurants I think right now are really struggling. I mean, we've seen restaurants have been around for 70 years that are going out of business and filing bankruptcy because they can't figure it out. They've lost the connection of what makes them great. It's all those, and I, Starbucks has been in the news a lot, right? Well,
right,
people don't remember what made Starbucks was this concept of them writing your name on the cup,
right. And then yelling
and this kind of experience that you had where they
right,
remembered you, and those are all things that build strong connections
exactly.
and kind of the undertone of emotive loyalty that we're trying to help more brands kind of figure out, well, what does that look like from the minute the consumer pulls into your parking lot, the
Right,
judgment begins,
right,
right? The judgment begins. They're then deciding every little thing. Is there trash in front of your building?
right.
What the minute I walk in, the first thing I smell, the first thing I hear, the first thing I see, all of those things have to be crafted in a way that are designed to win over your loyalty. It can't just be price anymore. It can't just be discounts.
No, and that all those pieces that come together have to be consistent, which you mentioned earlier. And consistency is the problem I think most retailers and restaurants are facing. In your opinion, how can they overcome some of the issues with being consistent?
Yeah, yeah. This is of those four cornerstones I
Right,
mentioned with connection, personalization, consistency, and investment. Consistency is the one that can do the most damage.
right,
And if you think about, and I always use the same example, you know, 15, 20 years ago, Outback Steakhouse was considered one of the most consistent, profitable chains out there
right,
because, and I know this because I ate at Outback Steakhouse all over the US. And the food was consistent. The experience was consistent every time I went. And what happens is this, what we refer to as cognitive dissonance, right? Which is you become attuned to expecting something to happen a certain way. And the minute that it doesn't happen that way, it causes friction. It's jarring, right?
right.
It creates a negative mental perception.
Exactly.
And this is why you hear people saying, boy, that place has really gone downhill,
Right,
right? Or that place isn't like it used to be because they lose consistency. And we see this with every brand, that starts out with 4 or 5 locations. People love it. The experience is great. And then they get to 50 and then they get to 100 and 1,000 and 8,000 and they've completely lost everything that made them great because they are not focused, maniacally focused, as we say,
right,
on keeping the brand integrity, especially franchised restaurants, right, that have control.
right,
So, this is where we help. And I mean, and I think we have a lot of solutions and a lot of products to help people. But at the end of the day, if somebody were to say, what's the biggest return on investment you can help our company with? And that is helping you understand consistency. We have 150,000 independent contractors across the U.S. We deploy them on a regular basis to assess experience in restaurants and retail and hotel. And it's an unbiased opinion, right? And so there's something that I talk about, what I refer to as the invisible gap. Senior leaders sitting, in their corporate offices believe these certain things are happening across their 1,000 locations. But the reality of it is, and this is this invisible gap, is that those are not happening.
right,
And there's a disconnect between what they believe and what actually happens. The problem is they're typically relying on internal staff. They're relying on their regional and district managers who are always, no fault of their own, going to be biased
right,
in their report out. If this is my store and Judy's the store manager and I love Judy, she's having an off day, I might, shave a few, give back a few points, right? It's
right,
just the nature of what it does. So getting an unbiased, real opinion on are the things that I expect to happen happening
right,
can go a long way to help you tread, through downturns and keep that brand consistency, which is really important across your 1,000 locations. And we're seeing it more and more with these chains really starting to kind of come off The wheels are coming off the bus in some of these locations because they've just lost focus on consistency.
Right. It's funny that unbiased self-assessment, excuse me, is such a useful tool for everything.
Yeah.
Because you do get tunnel vision. And, while you were talking, I was thinking about a restaurant I went to once a week, probably for 20 years, right?
Mm.
Because that's the groove you get in. You go out every Wednesday night or you go out
Sure.
every
Yeah.
Friday night.
Yeah.
And the emotional connection was that I knew waitresses' lives, like
Yes.
who had a baby, who just got divorced, and on those nights where maybe the meal wasn't up to par, right, or maybe the food came out a little late, it was okay because I wanted that emotional connection every time I
That's
went in.
right. That's right.
So you kind of give people a little leeway, which we should all do every day anyway. But
Sure.
it just all comes down to it's like CVS. You walk in, typically, hopefully, someone says hello to you.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. I mean, it
Maybe.
used to be very consistent.
Yeah.
But now, and back in those days, when they said hello, they also would say, "Oh, hey," because they knew me from having children or whatever.
Sure.
Diapers are on sale.
Yeah. That's
Now
exactly.
you're right. You walk in,
That's right.
it's probably like 60-40 if you get a hello.
It's such a. There's two things I have to comment on, Judy. Is we also try to remind brands that the least important people in any organization are the people with the C in their title. They're not the ones responsible for making, the wheels go round and round.
Right.
It's that cashier, it's that server, it's that frontline bartender,
Right.
to your point, that you as a consumer are developing an emotional connection with, that's driving you back. You're never going to meet these C leaders in these organizations. You don't know who they are. But yet, if you look at how we run businesses and I'm a huge advocate for spending 35 years of my life in retail and watching people that are making $7 and $8 and $9 an hour working their butts off to try to keep the store, going, or the restaurant going.
Right.
We have forgotten that. We have forgotten that they are the most important people, and that we've got to invest in those people.
That's right.
We have to train those people. We have to pay those people a living wage, right? So that they can make a living off of it. So that frontline person is so important. And I just have to share with you, because it's timely. This morning, I visited a local grocery store here, a very large grocery store. 7:30 in the morning, they just opened up. I think I was the only customer in there.
Right.
Every aisle had somebody working on it, whether they were stocking shelves or putting stuff out. And not one person said good morning. Not one person said, how are you? Are you finding everything okay? And I was in the store for a good 15 minutes and had to have passed 10 employees. Right. Businesses have literally lost the understanding that those small interactions, those little bitty things, are important and impactful in building loyalty. Right. And I was disappointed when I went to the front, and I even told the cashier. She said, did you find everything okay today? And I said, you're the first person that asked me that. She's like, really? And I said, because we've lost all semblance of what it means to be customer servant.
Right.
To remember that every customer that walks in or sits down in your restaurant is paying your bills.
Right.
Right? That's the only reason that they're there. And that's our mission. Our mission as an organization is, even if we have to smack people upside the head to get them to figure that out, is to change the way we're viewing CX today, because it's broken and it's not getting any better.
Well, a couple of years ago, or maybe even more, I might be dating myself, the whole rage was the brand ambassador. And every retail associate was a brand ambassador.
Yeah.
And I remember at the very onset, that's a lot to ask of someone you're paying minimum wage.
Yeah.
And it's a lot for them to be able to be, gung-ho, if maybe they're not being included in part of the whole process of connecting with the customer. So, it comes around every decade, but, that store associate, that cashier, they're critical.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, the whole concept of AI, certainly AI is fundamentally changing a lot of things and will
Right,
continue to change things. But what it will not replace is the need for us as human beings
right,
to connect with other human beings. And I get excited about AI, not that, you know, that we're talking about that, because I think it could eliminate all those silly, mundane
yeah,
tasks that nobody wants to do and open up a world where now you're going into a place to connect with an expert
right,
or somebody or something. The humanness of the experience is there. I always say this in restaurants: the quickest way to ruin a really good meal is to serve it poorly. It could be the best steak and French fries in the whole world, but if I don't serve it to you the right way with the right attitude
right,
and right, then it erodes the meal. And like I said, we've lost that, and it pains me as a student of the customer experience for 35 years to see what service have kind of devolved
right,
into. And we owe it to ourselves as consumers to get that back. I work hard for my money, as I'm sure you do.
right,
And when I choose to spend that with name your brand,
right,
I want to feel like they appreciate that. And that can just come in the form of somebody saying, "Good morning, how are you today? Thanks for coming in today."
right,
Just that tiny little thing leaves that positive impression in your brain. And that's one step closer to building a motive loyalty.
right. And it's funny because I just came off a weekend of traveling, and I'm a big hello person. Like if I walk by someone, I say hello. And I was just noticing, like in the airport, there was no connection. And I'm saying hello to people, they're almost startled that I'm saying hello.
Yeah,
And I found that disconnecting because as a consumer, I have a lot of options. I don't have to fly American.
that's exactly right.
I don't have to shop at Kroger. I don't have to go to CVS. So,
Yeah,
you know, if I'm not going to get that kind of like, hey, we're glad you're here, you know, I can try somewhere else. It
yeah,
can't be any worse, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so when we're talking about this consistency, how can a brand effectively monitor and measure how that customer experience is measuring up or falling
Yeah.
short?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of ways. I mean, obviously, we're proponents of independent, assessment, whether
Right,
that's a mystery shop, whether that's some sort of form of independent auditing that takes place that gives you that unbiased view of what's happening in your locations. We say, mystery shopping it's been around a long time. I mean, mystery shopping is not new. It's still a very valid, viable tool because if you're gauging the human experience, it takes a human to be able to do that, right?
right,
So if you go in and, there's all sorts of things you could do to assess food temperature and all those. But if you're asking me, was Judy friendly? Was she a friendly server? Well, the only way for you to really understand that is to get my experience that I
right,
had with you. Did I agree that you did or you didn't?
right,
And so we're big fans of that. Why more brands are not using, this kind of like I said, mystery shopping or auditing or something to assess the consistency, especially when they get bigger, it's just a missed opportunity for them. And coming out of retail, I mean, I've done millions of audits,
right,
regional audits and district audits, and those are great tools. Don't get me wrong, but you need an independent, unbiased opinion to tell you, is this happening or is it happening? And it's not just it's also little things like companies spending millions of dollars training associates. Starbucks just closed down all of their locations for like 3 or 4 hours,
right,
I forgot the number, to do some up training.
right,
Think about how much money that cost them to do that, right?
right,
Now, wouldn't you want to ensure that the training that you just spent millions and millions of dollars is actually intact and working?
right,
Well, you don't know that unless you get some independent. And we hear companies say, "Well, I just rely on social media." Social media is it's a good tool to monitor. Don't get me wrong, but their opinions are biased. They're not giving you the information that you necessarily want. They're just telling you about their experience, and oftentimes it's negative.
and
So
oftentimes it's not completely accurate.
it's not completely accurate.
Right,
It never is completely
right,
accurate. There's always some embellishing or something because you're angry about it.
right,
So to send somebody in that has a little bit more information, still a customer, but a little bit more information specifically on what to look at, that's just good business,
yeah.
right? And then to take that data and see where is it, where are you winning, so to speak, and where do you need to implement, some changes,
Right.
and then you remonitor that again. Those are really important aspects in this day and age for businesses, because most businesses are losing foot traffic, they're losing revenue, they cannot figure out why, they don't know why they're not connecting with the consumer anymore. And this is the only way to really figure that out. You got to figure out what is the connection with the consumer, because if it was a connection just based on value and price, and then we've had inflation now for 3 or 4 years, that's gone. I can't afford to go and buy a hamburger every single day to join your loyalty program.
Right.
So what other things are creating that stickiness?
So when we're talking about all this emotive and emotional connecting and how it ties into loyalty, what is the impact to the bottom line if you
Yeah.
compare it to that discount promotional strategy
Yeah.
that many are using?
Yeah. Well, I think the easiest way to see what this looks like is, and I'm picking on restaurants a little bit because they're really struggling right
Right.
now. Many of them are. But what do you see in response? So you see a brand that misses quarterly revenue expectations. The first thing they do is they launch some gimmick, something with Mr. Beast that they're going to put out there, or a collaboration with SpongeBob on a hamburger, right? And they put it out there. And I'm not saying those things are bad, but they give you a temporary lift, right? And so people get excited about it. They rush out, they do it, the novelty wears off, and then their teams are back at the table going, okay, what's next? And then eventually you have to keep pumping these kind of things out that only give you a temporary lift, and then you're back to the drawing board of figuring out how you get people in. So when you see promotions, discounts, special offers, deals, limited time offers, they're not bad. They just don't create sustainable connections, right? And if you think about the brands that you are really connected to, right? Because we all have them, whatever it is, the brands that you identify with this brand. Like, I talk to so many people that, the first thing that comes up is Whole Foods. They're connected, right? And the Whole Foods is their lifestyle, and it embodies their lifestyle, and it's who they are. Well, listen, I don't know if you've been into a Whole Foods lately, but it ain't cheap, Judy. And so they're not offering discounts and promotions to bring people into a Whole Foods or doing gimmicks. They have connected with their consumer in a way around their lifestyle. I go to Whole Foods because this is me, and it defines me as a consumer.
Exactly.
And so we all have brands like that, and those brands have been able to connect with you in a different way, on a different level. And not all brands are going to be able to do that. I mean, that's the first thing. Not all brands are going to be able to do that, but they can get much better about creating these moments and these experiences that lead to a connection that then builds loyalty for me. And it's those little moments that we talk about, these, like we said, these little things that they may not seem big, but just think about me walking through that grocery store and one person looking at me in the eye and just saying, "Hi, how are you today? Can I help you find anything?" That's a moment. That's a connection. And that's where brands have to get back to really thinking about, what does that look like for my business?
Exactly. And when you mentioned Whole Foods, I remember when they first came to Long Island, and I figured, all right, let me try them. Who always want to check out a new supermarket,
right?
And it's a culture. It's like Trader Joe's.
Yes.
There is like an obsession about the brand. And I can't even tell you how many times I reported on people wanting a Trader Joe's in a certain area on Long Island. And now, even down here in Myrtle Beach. And it's not because, Trader Joe's has the best pineapples or, has great discounts. I mean, I don't even know if they do a discount, but it's just, when you walk into that store, it's like part of your home.
It is. It's alignment with values, right? And I think that's the strongest way to build emotive loyalty. Again, not everybody's going to be able to do it, but when my values as a consumer or as a person align with the values of the company, that creates this really strong connection. You
Right.
see it with Apple, you see it with Tesla,
Yes.
you see it with these brands that you have maniacal customers, right? That are
Right.
just they're going to go with that brand regardless of how much it is,
Right.
right? They're going to pay it. They're going to do that because they identify with the brand. And like I said, not everybody's going to be able to do that, but you can in all businesses
Right.
create these moments of connection just to because you mentioned in earlier that you had a restaurant you went to every week, and I'm sure the food was good,
Right.
but you went there because you had
Yeah.
you learned the people
Right.
and you had an emotional connection. They knew you, you knew them. That's what was driving you back to that place, is
Exactly.
that connection,
Yeah. I mean, you can
right?
get chicken parmesan anywhere, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but when you're sitting there and the waitress has a free moment and comes over and talks to you, to the point where, we celebrated birthdays and
yes,
it became, 20 years of knowing people.
that's right.
Um, and I'm sorry we've kind of run out of time, but, I wanted to ask you one quick question that we didn't discuss before the podcast. What about the idea of unbiased internal reviews in the sense of the store associate and even the managers providing the brand leadership with what they see as reasons for the disconnect or gaps in the customer experience? Does that
Yeah.
work at all?
Oh, I think so, and I think smart brands are doing that, right? And I
Okay.
think smart brands are getting their store managers, their restaurant managers, their frontline people, and they're pulling them in for roundtables and connections and
Okay.
discussions on what are you hearing directly from your customer.
Right.
Remember, reviews. When we think about reviews, you're getting less than 1% of
Right.
your customer base typically giving you any feedback,
Right.
right? And typically it's skewed negative. So
Right.
the best way to get that kind of information is talk to the servers and the frontline employees that are dealing with the customers every day, that hear what they like and what they don't like and what's doing that. Smart companies are, will do that internally. We certainly offer that as a service.
Okay.
We can do that for companies as well. But I'm a huge fan of just brands having strategies to just check that consistency and that connection. If I'm the CEO and I go on Fox News and say, here are the 5 things you can expect in my restaurants when you go in, you better be validating that,
Right.
right? And I mean, we're doing this now. So you'll see this in the next couple of weeks. We just picked a very famous brand that's been all over the news about their excellent food and service. And their CEO came out and said, here are the things that you can expect. So we sent 50 people out to those locations and actually assessed whether those things were happening or not. So you can follow us. A closer look on LinkedIn will publish those results. But
Well,
it's very
I better
interesting.
get the scoop on that, Chris.
Yeah, it's very interesting when you do this because, again, it's that gap, right? I
Right.
believe it's happening,
Well, it's
but
been
they
great.
don't have checks and balances to figure out if it actually is or not.
Right, exactly. And I think another point I want to stress is that a closer look can help any size brand or retailer. This is not, um, something that costs billions of dollars.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and I'm pretty sure you guys can work something that fits every retailer's needs. Because I think, unfortunately, I think small and mid-sized retailers, they often think a lot of these things are out of
Yeah.
their financial
True.
reach.
That's true. Yeah. And listen, we have about 250 clients of all sizes. We
Right.
work with very big names you've heard of, and we work with little mom and pop places you haven't. We have a solution that fits everybody. And I think the thing that I would, just leave with your listeners and viewers is, we take a very intimate approach with people. So we don't ever try to peddle and sell things that aren't right for the brand. We want to get to know you, want to understand what your pain points are, and then we craft strategies that we believe will actually help you. And we don't just sell you products and walk away from you. We like to say we're an extension of your team and a partner. We want to help you get better. That's our mission in life. And if you ask anybody in my organization, they will tell you that the ultimate goal here is to increase the level of customer service that consumers are getting no matter where they go. That's our mission. We want to change the way that's being done today.
When that happens, that's the proof of the pudding for why a
Yes.
closer look is someone to work with.
Yeah. Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
thanks, Chris, for spending time with us today.
Yeah, Judy, it was wonderful. I could talk about this stuff all day, so
And I
thank you.
could too. And I think we have a lot in common in our background with retail,
Yeah,
especially to our listeners. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also check out retailcustomerexperience.com. Sign up for the weekly newsletter, and that way you will never miss another podcast episode.
awesome.
And thanks again, Chris.
Thanks, Judy. Thanks for having me.